Dudes, what's happening? It's Trent here, and today I've got for you a redesign of one of my favorite games of all time. Ever since I was a kid, I think it was 1985 or 86, The Legend of Zelda. Dudes, I was born to design characters and environments for a Legend of Zelda game. But I never got a chance to. I'm not Japanese. I won't ever get a chance to. But through the magic and the power of technology and the modern era, and just kind of having an awesome relationship with Sketchbook Pro, they've been sponsoring some of my videos, and they said it was cool if I do just a fun piece redesign of Link from The Legend of Zelda. I didn't have a specific idea in mind when I started, so you really kind of get to see the whole start to finish, nuts and bolts, behind the scenes, all the how the sausage is made kind of stuff of how this character design came to be. So let's do it. Let's jam. So I'm going to sketch out my Link here, and what I'm going for is going to be a bit more of a, well, first of all, let's check our dimensions for our image. Let's check image size, canvas size. Usually I want to be at about 2500 minimum of pixels for the width, and maybe, let's say, maybe 1800 for the height. And I'm going to do a little bit of time lapse here. I'm going to speed it up a bit. Don't worry about which brush you're using. Don't worry about keeping it clean or anything like that. Just as a blob phase, man. Just have fun with it. Come up with some cool shapes. And in this case, I'm trying to make it look like Link. He's kind of a skinny dude. I think his head was just a little too big. This is where I pop on that reference layer just a little bit more so that I can just double check that I'm getting the likeness and the body type. You know, it's not going to look like Link yet, but I can at least try to get the body type right. And as it stands right now, I think he's a little too muscular, but we'll work that out as we go and as we refine. Now, we're focusing our design, we want to focus on the design of the character. We want to focus on something that a modeler could build from. So we don't want to have a pose that's too dynamic or something that maybe we can't see too many of the details of his design. So that's why I'm kind of choosing something that is, it wouldn't call it a static pose because he still has a lot of attitude. He has a lot of personality in his posture, but he's not coming at the camera. There's no like camera distortions or not a lot of perspective going on. And that will make it easier to read the details and understand the character's design when the modeler is going in and actually building the character in 3D. All the information will be clearly readable, and that's something that's very important. You can't have a lot of shadows, and this is all just silhouette, so keep in mind, like, a lot of what you're seeing that's dark here is not going to end up being dark in the final version. Once I've kind of established my blob phase, I'll take that layer, my blob, and I'll back off the opacity using the slider and the layers stack. And then I'll create a new layer on top, and that's when I start to add in my line art. And this is when I start to actually detail out things, and I start to think about the actual construction of elements. You know, how is that sword constructed, and how do these materials layer, and what kind of patterns am I going to use? You know, this is where I'm really working out the character design. When you're redesigning something, I think the key thing to keep in mind is to really pay attention to what defines that character or setting or whatever it is, or that material or that object. So this is true with doing like skins as well. So I do a lot of skins for League of Legends and things like that, and other games, and you really want to be able to define what it is that makes that character who they are, what it is that makes that object what it is, and try to isolate like maybe one or two defining elements. There is a kind of iconic thing that we have to have for Link, and one is probably the style of the hair, two, probably the kind of sideburns that he has that hang down, although they can be presented in different ways. The pointy ears are a standard for Link. The colors, generally, you have to kind of go with like the green, something very heavy green around his design, although you can get different outfits in some of the games. But for the most part, if we're going for the iconic, this is definitely Link look, You have to go green. Triforce symbols on things. With some blue on the Master Sword. If he's carrying that Master Sword, it's a pretty good chance it's Link. Now I took some bold, some risks, I guess you'd say, with some of the face paint. I really wanted to try to do something that almost felt tribal, a little bit of like Monster Hunter influence, a little bit of just something that felt more wild, more crazy. Like this guy, maybe this is a version of Link where he's been living with some small tribe in the wilderness somewhere. He's already gone on a bit of an adventure, and he's collected a lot of cool trinkets and cool items. He's being influenced by some strange new presence, and that needed to be represented in this image as well. I did pull up a lot of the patterns that you see in other Zelda games, and I'm using those to really drive home that this is, I mean, when you first look at this character, if this had any other label on it, people would say that's a Zelda ripoff. Because there's so many elements that scream Triforce. It screams Legend of Zelda. You've got the same coily, curly kind of shape language going on everywhere, the same kind of patterns that you see on every other design of Link, but it's put together, it's assembled in a way that is just a different way of thinking than what we've seen before. At least that is my goal as I'm doing a redesign. Now, the inspiration and the idea for this character, for the fairy, is sort of kind of pulled a lot from the Skull Kid from Majora's Mask. And I wanted to kind of get that sort of creepy combination of colors, and like I almost wanted the idea of her wings having eyes in them that just kind of looked a little cracked out and a little bit just twisted, in the way that Zelda tends to twist things, like as if there was some dark realm that can distort the mind of a character, and I wanted her to sort of embody that. And the implication of her being alongside Link sort of gives this implication that he's being guided by something that's sort of a twisted mind, and that kind of implies a little bit of potential ideas for stories. And while even though this isn't a official, in any capacity, official character design, I always try to infuse some kind of a content or context that would give some ideas to a game designer or to the rest of my team that they can sort of springboard off of, and the relationship between objects and items can create that context. Once I feel like my design is pretty solid, that's when I create a new layer. I flatten everything I've got, I create a new layer on top of that, and in this case I think I just went straight up with a color layer. You can set the mode for that layer to color, and then I created a multiply layer underneath that so that I could just start to fill in my flat colors. And this is what I mean by flat colors, is I'm not really rendering levels of it or highlights too much. I did start to play around with like, what is my gradient going to be, from the highlight areas of his hair to the shadow areas of his hair and things like that. But for the most part, it's really blobs of flat color on that multiply layer. And what that does is it's just going to color in the values on top of what I already had for my values of my design. And this is a little bit of a push and pull thing. And if I'm to be completely straightforward about it, my process changes constantly. I'm always changing out my process and how I approach things. But with the digital age, the coolest thing about it is that it really doesn't matter what colors you put down. Get your values, pretty confident. Get your forms turning. Focus on grayscale rendering for a while. And when you do get to the point where you're coloring your pieces, you'll begin to realize that whatever color you put down, you can always change later. There are a number of different modes and tools in Sketchbook Pro that allow you to make a color adjustment well after you've already placed down some color. You don't have to really worry or stress out. You can always fix it. And, at some point, you really have to kind of put a painting down and move on to the next one. But for the most part, I think that the biggest challenge that most people run into is that they feel like, oh, my work doesn't look as good as this other guy's work, or whatever, this, the level that you want it to be at, and you become discouraged by that. But in reality, the best advice that I could give you is really just have fun with it, play around with it, and don't have a lot of high expectations for yourself. So I guess the short version of that is just don't quit. Don't give up. Find joy in the failure and you'll be good. A lot of people might be surprised to find out that I pretty much, I don't want to say I hate my pieces, but I'm never happy with them. I always feel like I could go back and redesign that or redraw that. Nothing I do is ever good enough for my own standards, and that makes it, it makes it hard to keep getting up and trying again, knowing very well that I'm going to be dissatisfied with it even after I finish. But at the same time, it is a mindset, it is a kind of a mentality that you have to adopt, when you become a digital artist. When you put your mind to doing anything, you have to be in love with the process of it, not the results of it. I was reading an interesting book about this topic recently, where a guy was saying when he was younger, he really wanted to be a rock star. He really wanted to be in a band and be a successful musician, but ultimately, what he never really did it. He did all these other things, and ultimately his conclusion was it didn't matter that much to him. The process, the pain, the struggle of the doing wasn't what he was in love with. He was in love with the idea of being successful at it and being admired. He was in love with the idea of the results, not the hard work itself, and so that's why he did not pursue it. And I think that's true with anything. If you fall in love with the process of doing it and the struggle and the challenge of doing it, it'll never be easy. But if you can enjoy the pain of it, then you'll eventually get good at it. Well, good enough that maybe you'll get a sponsorship by Sketchbook Pro or something, or a gig on a cool game or two. So I had kind of finished the design for Link and for the Dark Fairy, and at this point, I wanted to really drive home that this was kind of concept for a game, and I wanted to kind of fill the audience's mind with the idea that you'd get all these kind of cool different gear and items, because a big part of Zelda is about the items, and you get like your hook shot and your bombs and things. I didn't want to just do them exactly how you've seen them done before. In hindsight, I do kind of wish I would have gotten a little crazier with the designs on these. I didn't do anything super creative with the bombs or any of that. It was just kind of a neat, I would say probably the thing that I got most creative with was the hook shot kind of a thing. So that about wraps up the Link redesign for The Legend of Zelda. This one was so much fun. I want to thank Sketchbook Pro for sponsoring this video. Dudes, if you haven't tried out their software, go check it out. There's a link in the text field below the video. I'm doing a good number of Sketchbook Pro tutorials on my YouTube channel, so please subscribe if you're into this. And also remember that if you're super hardcore and you want my lengthy, meaty, like 30, 40 hour box sets of tutorials, you can pick those up from Gumroad, also in the text field below the video. There you can find extended versions of this video, near real-time drawings if you want to analyze my process, and just mountains of goodies, including brushes, etc. I want to thank you all for stopping by. Dudes, it's a pleasure as always. And remember, if you're gonna draw a Zelda redesign, draw a Zelda design with some freaking passion. All right, dudes, that's it for me. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.